I still don't know which part broke me the most. Was it the way he looked at me like I was a burden? Or the way he said it, like he'd rehearsed it with her behind closed doors? Mom, she wants the house now. We need you to find somewhere else to live. That was the moment. Right there. My knees buckled like someone had kicked them out from under me. I grabbed the side of the dining table to keep from collapsing completely. But my heart hit the floor. I'd just buried my husband 2 months earlier. The man I shared this home with for 41 years. And now, my son, our only child, was telling me I didn't belong here anymore. That she wanted it now. I stood there with his words echoing in my head, like a bell tolling the end of something sacred. Something irreplaceable. I didn't say a word back to him. I just turned and walked to the bedroom I used to share with his father and closed the door. Let me know where you're listening from. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. And if this story speaks to you, share your thoughts below. Don't skip, because what happens at the end will surprise you more than the betrayal itself. I sat on the edge of the bed that night, holding an old photo of us, me and my husband David, on our wedding day. My hand trembled. I kept whispering, I don't understand. I don't understand. I wasn't ready for any of it. I wasn't ready to be alone. I wasn't ready to be unwanted. I wasn't ready to watch my son, the baby I once carried, the boy I raised with bedtime stories and hot cocoa, turn to me like I was just. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Not after everything I gave. Not after all the sacrifices we made so he could have the best chance at life. David would have never allowed this if he were still here. The day we moved into that house, I remember him carrying me through the doorway like we were still 20-something and invincible. He used to joke that the mortgage would outlive us both. He didn't think we'd pay it off so fast. But we did together. I worked long hours at the hospital back then, doing admin shifts through flu season and budget cuts. David took over every odd job he could. We didn't have much, but we had each other. And eventually, we had him, Matthew. When I finally came out of the bedroom, Matthew and his wife Rachel were seated on the couch like they'd already taken over. Their 2-year-old daughter was watching cartoons, oblivious to the sharp tension that filled the room like fog. Rachel didn't look at me, not even once. She just sipped her green smoothie and kept tapping at her phone. I'll be gone by the end of the week, I said quietly. Matthew looked relieved. He actually looked relieved. No, Mom, are you sure? No. Let's talk about this. Just a small exhale, like a weight had lifted from his chest. I remember walking past him, brushing against the sleeve of the boy I used to cradle against my chest during thunderstorms, and feeling nothing. Nothing from him. No warmth. No apology. I went upstairs and packed in silence, folded every sweater, took down every framed photo. I didn't want them to throw away the pieces of our life like garbage when I was gone. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about David, how his last weeks were filled with pain, but not bitterness. He passed away in our bedroom holding my hand, whispering, "You'll be all right. Just promise me you'll live after me." I thought he meant emotionally. I didn't know I'd have to survive this kind of betrayal. They gave me until Friday. I didn't argue. I could have, I should have, but I didn't. Instead, I called a friend from church, asked if she knew of any furnished apartments for rent nearby. Something small, temporary. She offered her basement suite for a few months, said I could stay for free. I refused, told her I'd pay. I didn't want charity. I'd been made to feel like a burden enough for one lifetime. Friday came. I wheeled out 2 suitcases and 3 boxes. Everything else, I left behind. They didn't even come outside to say goodbye. The car pulled away from the curb. I didn't look back. I told myself I would rebuild, that I had to. But that night, when I lay on the stiff mattress of someone else's guest bed, with the hum of an unfamiliar fridge and the creak of pipes in the wall, I cried. I cried like I hadn't cried since the night David died, and somewhere between those sobs, something inside me shifted, not out of hate, not even out of revenge, but out of something colder, something deeper, resolve. Because the one thing they didn't realize when they pushed me out of that house was that David and I never built anything without a plan, and they hadn't even read the fine print. I met David in 1977 at a church fundraiser where he was helping serve chili, and I was manning the bake sale table. He was tall, awkward, had a crooked smile, and warm brown eyes that made you feel like you were the only one in the room. He'd bought 3 lemon squares just so he could keep talking to me. By the end of the night, I'd given him my number, and a week later, he showed up at my apartment with flowers so fresh, they still had dew on the petals. He never missed a week after that. We got married 2 years later in a small church with 50 people folding chairs and a potluck reception. I wore a dress my aunt sewed by hand. He wore his father's suit. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. We were happy. We had almost nothing, but we had each other, and that was everything. David was the kind of man who never let the world hearten him. When I lost my job at the clinic in the early 80s, he worked nights stocking shelves and mornings at the lumberyard until I got back on my feet. When we lost our first baby to a miscarriage, he held me in the hospital hallway and didn't let go for hours. He never rushed my grief, never blamed my body. He just said, "We'll try again when you're ready." That kind of love doesn't show up in the movies. It lives in the quiet places. We bought our house in 1989. It was a tired old thing with cracked windows and peeling paint, but it was on a good street, and the bones were strong. We scrubbed every inch, laid new floors ourselves, and painted each room with cheap brushes and more laughter than skill. That house became our home. Every corner had a story. The scar on the kitchen counter, where I dropped a hot pot. The pencil marks on the laundry room wall tracking Matthew's height year after year. The sound of David's boots hitting the doormat every night at 6:03 sharp. When Matthew was born, everything shifted. He was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and a cry that filled the whole room like music. David held him first. Cried like a child himself. Said, "That's our legacy right there." I didn't know what he meant then, but I do now. We gave that boy everything. We didn't have much money, but we had drive. I worked overtime, sometimes double shifts. David never complained. When Matthew turned 7, we cashed out our only savings bond to buy him a piano because he'd shown interest in music. When he changed his mind a year later, we didn't say a word. We just nodded, sold the piano, and supported his new dream of playing hockey. That was the story of our lives, giving without keeping score. Rachel came into the picture when Matthew was in his 2nd year of university. She was beautiful, polished, and knew how to make herself liked. At first, I welcomed her like a daughter. She brought over homemade lasagna, complimented my decor, laughed at David's bad jokes. I remember thinking, maybe this is the daughter I never had. David liked her. Said she was good for Matthew, calming, focused. But even then, there were cracks. The way she'd shift when David asked about her parents. The way her eyes flicked around our home like she was appraising it. Still, we supported them. Helped with the wedding, paid for their honeymoon as a surprise. That was David's idea. "Let them start better than we did," he said. So we dipped into our retirement fund, booked them a week in Greece, and sent them off with handwritten letters tucked into their luggage. Rachel never said thank you. Not really, but Matthew did. At least back then. They moved in with us after the baby was born. Said it was temporary. "Just until we get on our feet," Rachel said. I didn't mind. The house was big enough, And I liked hearing a baby cry again this time without fear of loss. I cooked for them, cleaned when they were too tired, babysat on weekends. But over time, the air shifted. Rachel stopped saying good morning. Matthew started disappearing into long phone calls. I noticed Rachel changing things, small things like curtains and lampshades. Then bigger things like locks on cabinets or mail being redirected. David noticed too, but by then he was already sick. He was diagnosed late. Pancreatic, the kind that sneaks up on you. We caught it too late. He was gone in 6 months. Rachel barely helped. Matthew avoided the hard days. It was me in that room with David every night, holding his hand, whispering stories into his ear. He smiled when I read him our old anniversary cards. Even in pain, he'd say, "You're still the best thing that ever happened to me." I remember the night before he passed. He asked me to open the drawer beside the bed. Inside was an envelope. "Read it when you're ready," he said. "Everything's there." I never opened it. Not then. Not at the funeral. Not when they handed me tissues and said hollow words about heaven and time healing all wounds. I kept it tucked away in my purse. Somehow I knew it would matter later. And it did. After the funeral, things changed fast. Matthew stopped coming home early. Rachel started acting like the house was hers. I chalked it up to grief. But then came the conversation, the family meeting they called it. Rachel did most of the talking. "We need more space. It's better if we take over the house. You can get something smaller, something manageable." She used words like manageable and suitable, like I was some kind of old luggage she didn't know where to store. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I just nodded. And walked away. But that night, in that cold basement apartment, I finally opened the envelope. Inside were 3 things: a letter, a deed, and a legal notice. David had transferred full ownership of the house into a living trust under my name only. There was no mention of Matthew. No clause for inheritance. No shared ownership. Just me. And a note in David's handwriting, shakier than I remembered, but still strong. "If they ever turn on you, don't give them a damn thing. This is yours. Always was." I stared at David's handwriting long after my eyes blurred. The paper shook in my hands, but my body was still. I wasn't angry. Not yet. What I felt was something deeper. Like standing on the edge of something I couldn't name yet. A quiet fury. A silence filled with weight. He knew. Somehow he'd seen it coming. Maybe not the exact words, not the timing. But something in their eyes. In the way Matthew had started talking to me like I was temporary. David saw it. And he made sure I'd be protected. I pressed the letter to my chest and let the silence settle. Then I read the deed again. Slowly this time. Every line, every legal clause. The house wasn't just in a trust. It was irrevocable, meaning no one could contest it, no matter how loudly they knocked. And it was ironclad. David had worked with a lawyer I hadn't known about. A friend of his from his old union days. Someone who knew exactly how to keep it airtight. It changed something in me. Not just the knowledge of it, but the fact that David trusted me with it. That he believed I'd know when the moment came. And it had. Matthew's voice kept echoing in my head. "She wants the house now." Rachel's voice too. "You'd be happier in a place of your own." I saw now that it wasn't grief talking. It was convenience. It was greed. And now, they were sitting in a house they didn't own. Rearranging furniture that didn't belong to them. Hosting dinners for Rachel's friends and pretending they were homeowners. It almost made me laugh. Almost. But I didn't act yet. No, that's not how David raised me. That's not how I raised myself. I waited. I watched. I gathered. The first thing I did was call the lawyer listed in David's letter. His name was Vernon Steele. Sharp voice, clear eyes, still called me ma'am, even though he had to be my age. When I told him who I was, there was a pause. Then he said, "Ah, so the day has come." I met him the next morning at a small office above a bakery. The place smelled like cinnamon and dust. He pulled out the original trust document, laid it on the desk between us, and walked me through it. Everything, clause by clause. I signed a few documents officially asserting my role as sole trustee and beneficiary. Then I leaned back in the chair and asked, "What if they try to claim ownership?" Vernon looked at me for a long second and said, "They can't. Not legally, not morally, not with what I'm about to send them." 2 weeks later, Matthew called me. I let it go to voicemail. The message was short. "Hey, Mom. We got something in the mail from some lawyer. Can you call me back?" I didn't. The next day, he called again. This time, his voice cracked a little. "Mom, I don't understand. Why does it say the house isn't? Why is your name still on everything?" Still, I didn't call back, because I needed him to sit with it. I needed him to walk through those rooms and feel the walls press in, to realize the ground wasn't his. Rachel must have read the papers. She was always quicker than him, always watching, always planning 2 steps ahead. I imagined her pacing the kitchen, the one she'd just had remodeled with my husband's money. I imagined her eyes darting across the legal language, the panic rising in her throat, and it gave me a kind of peace I hadn't felt since before the funeral. They had no idea what was coming. A week later, Rachel emailed me. I hadn't even known she had my email. It was cold, formal. She asked me to clarify the legal situation surrounding the residence and said that uncertainty creates strain for the household and our child. I didn't respond. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about their image, about their standing. Let them sweat. Let them sit in the house they tried to steal. Let them feel the foundation shift under their feet. I kept working in silence. Quiet mornings at the community center where I'd started volunteering. Evenings going through David's journals, his old sketchbooks. He used to draw birds, dozens of them, hawks, finches, even owls. They're free, he told me once. They don't ask permission to fly. I understood now. Matthew tried one more time, this time in person. I heard the knock on the door around 7 p.m. I didn't answer. He knocked again, then called through the door, "Mom, I just want to talk. Please." His voice wasn't angry. It was smaller, but still, I didn't open it. He stayed for 5 minutes, then left. That night, I sat at my little desk, opened my laptop, and began writing something I hadn't planned to write. A letter. Not to him, not yet, to the bank. I transferred full control of the trust to a secondary holding account. I froze any access to secondary claimants. I prepared formal eviction papers notarized and sealed. Not to serve yet, just to have ready. And then I waited. Because when you've been underestimated long enough, you learn to play quiet. You learn to let the storm build behind your eyes. And when it's time to strike, you strike so softly, they don't even hear it until it's too late. Friday morning came with gray clouds hanging over the city. I remember sitting by the window sipping tea from the same chipped blue mug David always used, watching the drizzle streak down the glass like threads unraveling from the sky. My bones felt tired, but my mind had never been sharper. Something in me had shifted. Not bitterness, not vengeance. It was colder than that. Cleaner. A quiet resolve that ran through me like steel. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to throw anything or make threats. I was going to be still, precise, ruthless, like the woman Rachel pretended to be, but never truly was. That morning, I received an email from Vernon. Subject line confirmation of execution. Inside was a PDF. It was the final draft of the formal notice prepared, notarized, and logged. All it needed was a send button. But I wasn't ready for that yet. Not quite. I needed them to stew a little longer. To feel something real. Something earned. I walked to the community center that afternoon, just like I always did on Fridays. I helped unload food pantry boxes, organized shelves, and restocked the hygiene kits. No one there knew about the storm unfolding behind the surface of my smile. That was the beauty of age. You learn to wear calm like a mask, while everything inside you burns like firewood. When I got home, my phone was blinking. 3 missed calls, all from Matthew. The last one had a voicemail. His voice was strained, like he'd been crying. "Mom, please. Rachel and I are going through a rough patch. I think we messed things up. I didn't know Dad left all that in your name. I thought..." A pause, a breath. "I thought it would pass to me automatically. Please call me back." But I didn't, because the truth is, he did know. Maybe not the specifics. Maybe not the trust documents. But he knew what kind of man David was. What kind of woman I was. He just gambled that I would fold. That I'd be too heartbroken to stand up for myself. That Rachel's sharp tongue would outmatch my quiet dignity. They were wrong. 2 days later, Rachel showed up at my door. She didn't knock. She banged. Fists hard and fast like a cop raid. I opened the door, just a crack chain still latched, and there she stood, hair perfect, lipstick fresh, but eyes wild. "We need to talk," she snapped. I didn't smile. I didn't even blink. "I don't think we do. You can't just take the house." I tilted my head. "It was never yours to take." She rolled her eyes. "You're doing this to hurt Matthew, to punish us." "No. I'm doing this to protect what David built. What we built. You tried to erase me from it." She leaned in closer, whispering now, like she didn't want the neighbors to hear. "Do you know what this will do to our family? To your granddaughter?" And there it was. The pivot. The manipulation. The weaponization of innocence. But I was ready. "You should have thought about that before you asked me to leave my own home," I said, voice steady. Then I shut the door. I didn't slam it. I closed it. Slowly. Deliberately. She stood there for a while. I watched her through the peephole. She looked stunned, like someone had hit her with a reality she didn't see coming. Then she walked away. That night, I pulled out a box I hadn't opened in years. Inside were photos, hundreds of them. David holding Matthew as a baby. Matthew's first soccer game, Christmas mornings. Me standing by the kitchen counter in a flour-dusted apron. Rachel was in some of them too. Younger, softer, before the angles in her face turned sharp from ambition. I looked at one photo in particular. The 4 of us at the beach. Matthew holding Rachel's hand. David with his arm around me, his smile wide and easy. I studied it like a stranger would, trying to see what we were before it all cracked. Then I lit a candle, not for nostalgia, for clarity. I was done grieving, and in the morning, I hit send. The email went out at 8:07 a.m. The subject line, Notice of Occupancy Termination. It included the full legal summary, a deadline for vacating the property, and a formal declaration of my ownership. No emotion, no venom, just facts. I printed a copy too. Sent it via courier. With signature required. At 10:42, Matthew called. I let it go to voicemail again. He didn't leave one. At 11:15, Vernon called to confirm delivery. At 2:33, Rachel texted me. "You've made your point. What do you want?" I stared at that message for a long time. What did I want? At first I thought I wanted the house back. The rooms, the memories, But now I realized I didn't. What I wanted was respect. What I wanted was truth. What I wanted was for them to feel just 1 ounce of what they'd made me feel, and that meant taking everything. That evening, I called Vernon again. We discussed asset restructuring. I moved the remaining joint accounts David had left into a new secure fund. I updated the will. I assigned rights to a foundation for widowed women. Every dollar now had a purpose. Every brick in that house now had a name. And then I made one last call. To the shelter director at Grace House. They'd been waiting for a property large enough to house families escaping violence. I told her she could tour the house within 2 weeks. She wept. I smiled. Rachel and Matthew still didn't know. But they would soon. Because I'd scheduled a final meeting. At the house. 1 week from now. Everyone would be there. And what they thought was going to be a conversation was going to be a reckoning. They thought it was going to be a discussion. A negotiation, maybe. That was the tone in Matthew's voice when he finally got me on the phone. Can we meet at the house? Just us. I think we all need to clear the air. I could hear Rachel in the background whispering something, probably feeding him lines. But his voice didn't have her sharpness. It was softer now, laced with nerves. I agreed. 1 week from today. Sunday. 4 p.m. That was all I said. He tried to say more, some small talk, some vague apology forming in his throat, but I hung up before he could finish. Because I wasn't going there to listen. I was going there to end things. To deliver what David had built into place long before either of them started playing house with my memories. Sunday arrived. Rain again. Of course it rained. I wore a slate gray blazer one David used to love on me. Said it made me look like a lawyer who could burn down a courthouse with her words. I smiled at the memory. Tucked it into my chest like armor. Vernon arrived 10 minutes before I did. We met 2 blocks from the house and walked in together. I wasn't afraid, not of them, not of their desperation. I was calm, steady. The kind of calm that comes after fire has already cleared the forest and made way for new ground. When we stepped inside, I saw them seated on the couch. Rachel had her legs crossed, arms tight, jaw clenched. Matthew stood as I entered, out of habit maybe, or guilt. His eyes darted between me and Vernon. "Who's this?" he asked. Vernon smiled politely. "Legal counsel." That shifted the air in the room immediately. Rachel stood up too, adjusting the hem of her blouse like that would somehow give her control. "We thought this was a private conversation," she said. I looked at her. Right in the eyes. It was. Until you made it legal. They didn't understand yet. Not fully, that's why I waited. I sat down first, opened the folder in my lap, and then I began. This home is no longer yours to claim. As of this week, the trust ownership has been reaffirmed under my sole direction. And as trustee, I've made a final decision about the future of this property. Rachel interrupted, of course. "You can't just take it out from under us. We live here. We have a child. I didn't flinch. I didn't take anything. You were never entitled to it. You assumed, and then you acted on that assumption. You asked me to leave my home, the one I built with my husband, so that you could pretend it was yours." Matthew stepped forward, now palms open. "Mom, please, I made a mistake. We were grieving. Things were tense. I didn't mean it the way it came out." That was the first honest thing he'd said in months. I looked at him, really looked. He wasn't the boy I raised, but he was still mine. Still flesh of my flesh. And even though I was done letting him hurt me, a part of me still ached for the child he used to be. But the damage was done. "You didn't just make a mistake," I said. "You made a choice. You watched me pack my life into boxes and didn't stop me. And now, You want to negotiate? Vernon leaned forward. Calm, professional. Per the documents delivered to you last week, the house will be vacated within the next 5 days. Utilities will be transferred. Personal belongings can be collected by appointment only. After that point, entry will be considered trespassing. Rachel's mouth dropped open. You're evicting us. No, I said I'm reclaiming my home, and then I'm giving it to someone who actually needs it. She blinked. I pulled out the final document from my folder and handed it to her. A property transfer contract. Donation of title. Signed. Sealed. The house has been donated to Grace House, a shelter for women and children escaping domestic abuse. It will be used as transitional housing. Bedrooms will be shared. The nursery will be rebuilt. The kitchen will feed women who have nowhere else to go. Rachel turned pale. You can't be serious, she whispered. Oh, I'm very serious. Matthew sat down hard like someone had pulled the floor from under him. But Dad would never... Dad did, I cut in. He saw this coming. He left me everything, and he trusted me to do what was right. Rachel was shaking now, lips parted like she wanted to scream, but nothing came out. You played house, I said quietly, with a home you didn't earn. And now it's going to serve someone who actually understands what home means. There was silence for a long time. Matthew finally broke it. Where are we supposed to go? I looked at him. No anger, just truth. That's your problem now. Vernon gathered the document, stood, and offered a final nod. 5 days. No extensions. I walked out of that house with my back straight and my heart still. The rain hadn't stopped, but I didn't feel it. Not on my skin, not in my bones. For the first time in months, I felt dry inside, untouched, whole. As Vernon drove me back, I didn't speak. I just looked out the window and watched the house disappear behind me. Not my house anymore, but no longer theirs either. It had become something better, and the reckoning that had just begun. I didn't check in with them. I didn't drive by the house. I didn't wonder what they packed first, or who said what when the deadline arrived. I'd spent too long letting other people's chaos cloud my peace. This time, I stayed still. 5 days came and went like a quiet clock ticking down in the background. Vernon confirmed everything on the 6th day. Key surrendered, locks changed, confirmation filed. The house was no longer a battleground. It was a sanctuary now. And I was finally free. But freedom is strange at first. It feels too quiet, too still. Like stepping off a ship after months at sea, your legs don't trust the ground. I woke up that first morning after the transfer with the sunlight pouring through the little window in my basement suite, and for a second, I felt a pang of doubt, a flicker of guilt. That voice inside, soft and cruel, that said, maybe you went too far. Maybe they'll hate you forever. But then I remembered how Rachel sat in my kitchen, speaking in that clipped tone, telling me I'd be happier somewhere manageable. I remembered how Matthew stood there silent, letting it happen. I didn't owe them peace. I owed myself dignity. And David, I owed him that too. I focused on my days. I volunteered. I cooked for myself again, slow, careful meals with fresh herbs and olive oil. I stopped checking my phone. I stopped rereading old texts. I let the silence speak. But of course, the silence didn't last. It started small. A voicemail from Matthew's former co-worker, one of the guys from the construction crew David used to help fund. Just wondering if Matthew's okay. Haven't seen him at the site in a while. I didn't return the call. But I noted it. Then a woman I used to know from the neighborhood bumped into me at the market. I heard they're living in a rental over near Ashwood. Not so nice. Small, I think? Rough for the baby, huh? She said it like gossip, but I heard the edge in her voice. Everyone was talking. Then Rachel's social media posts stopped. I didn't follow her, but people sent me screenshots anyway. Look at this one. She's still trying to make it seem like they're in that house. Carefully cropped photos. Just the garden wall, the kitchen backsplash, but no tags, no addresses. Just the illusion, until it stopped altogether. A week later, another message came in, this one from Rachel herself. Short, unfiltered. You humiliated us. You could have done this privately. You wanted people to know. I didn't reply. Because she was right. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted the truth to have a voice. And if that voice came from whispers on front porches or screenshots passed around between old neighbors, so be it. A month passed, then 6 weeks, and slowly, things began to break. I heard from Vernon again. Matthew's credit situation has changed, he said. Looks like they defaulted on a joint line of credit you had no part in. There's also some indication of a loan unsecured, based on the assumption that they'd be inheriting the property. I didn't respond right away, but I sat with it. They gambled everything on something they never owned. And now, the collapse was underway. Another week passed. Then a knock came at my door. Soft. Hesitant. I looked through the peephole. Matthew. Alone. I opened it just a crack. No chain this time. Just enough to see him, unshaven eyes, red shoulders slouched like a boy who had finally truly broken. Can I talk to you? He asked. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just stepped back and let the door swing open. He sat down on the edge of the small sofa I kept near the kitchen, looked around the tiny space like he was trying to make sense of who I was again. Not the mother who packed his lunches, but the woman who made him leave a house he thought would be his. I lost everything, he said. Rachel's staying with her mother. I think she's done. I stayed quiet. He looked up at me. I didn't think you'd actually go through with it. I tilted my head. Why not? I don't know. Because your mom. You've always bent. And there it was. Not cruelty, not entitlement. Just the truth. He had gotten so used to me giving folding softening that when I finally stood tall, it felt like betrayal. I didn't yell. I didn't reach out. I simply said, You never read Dad's letter, did you? He blinked. What letter? I walked to the small bookshelf, pulled the copy from the folder Vernon had given me, and handed it to him. He read in silence. David's words were clear. If they ever forget who you are, remind them. You are the soul of this family. Don't let them trade your worth for comfort. Matthew looked up slowly and cried. Not loudly, not with drama, just tears running down his face, fast and quiet. I was stupid, he said. I didn't argue. He looked around again. You're here, in this tiny place, and you still gave the house away. I nodded, because it was never about the house. He wiped his face with his sleeve. I don't know how to fix this. I sat across from him, my hands folded. Some things can't be fixed, but they can be understood, and maybe that's the first step. He left an hour later. Didn't ask for money, didn't beg. Just said thank you. And for the first time in months, I believed he meant it. I closed the door behind him and breathed. Not relief, something quieter, something final. The beginning of something new. The last time I'd heard Matthew cry like that, he was 9 years old, standing in the hallway after scraping his knee on the pavement outside the school. I remember the way he buried his face into my chest back then, arms tight around my waist, needing comfort without shame. But this time, he didn't reach for me. He didn't ask to stay. He just sat in his guilt like a grown man should. And when he left, I didn't follow him to the door. I stayed where I was watching the space he'd just occupied, wondering if maybe, just maybe, some part of the boy I raised had finally come back. Not to take, not to demand, but to see, to feel. The days after that visit moved slowly. Still no calls from Rachel. Not a single word since her last message. I assumed she was licking her wounds in private, keeping her distance while she figured out her next angle. But deep down, I knew. This wasn't a pause. This was a fracture. And she wouldn't come back from it easily. It was 2 weeks later when the phone rang again. This time, it was Vernon. "You may want to sit down," he said. I already was. He cleared his throat gently. Rachel filed a petition. She's attempting to sue for damages. Claims emotional distress, loss of marital equity. She's accusing you of deliberately destabilizing her family. I didn't respond. He continued. But there's no legal standing. The house was never hers. No shared ownership. The trust is ironclad. The assets are documented. Her lawyer will realize it's pointless. She's either desperate or trying to scare you. I exhaled slowly. She's not trying to scare me, Vernon. She's trying to save face. I hung up, walked to the sink, poured myself a glass of water, and stared at the reflection in the window. The woman looking back at me didn't look angry. She looked finished, like someone who had carried a heavy load up a long hill and finally reached the top. The next day, I got another message. This one from a different number. "I need to speak with you. One time. No lawyers. Just us. Please. Rachel." I sat with it for hours, watched the daylight move across the floor. I wasn't afraid of her anymore. Not of her manipulation, her poise, her rehearsed cruelty. That woman had already lost. But something in me was curious. Not for revenge, but for confirmation. So I said yes. We agreed to meet in a neutral place, a park near the lake, not far from the old house. I arrived early, sat on a bench overlooking the water. The waves were soft, the wind warm. For a moment, it almost felt like peace. Then I saw her. She walked toward me in heels too high for the gravel path, a beige trench coat tied tightly around her waist, sunglasses, shielding whatever shame lingered in her face. When she sat down, she didn't look at me right away. "I thought I'd never see you again," she said. "I didn't expect to hear from you," I replied. She took off the glasses slowly. Her eyes were bloodshot. Not from tears, though, from exhaustion. She looked 10 years older than the last time I saw her. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she said. "I just wanted space, stability, somewhere to raise our daughter properly. I thought you'd understand that." I didn't say anything. I let her speak. But then, I got used to it. The house, the comfort, the idea that it would be ours eventually. I thought Matthew had it all figured out. That you were just temporary, an obstacle, I said. She flinched. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know that word doesn't fix anything. I know I said things I shouldn't have. But I was scared. Scared of losing something I thought I'd earned." "You didn't earn it," I said calmly. "You expected it. There's a difference." She nodded, looked down at her hands. The rings were gone. "I lost him," she said. "Not just the house, not just the money. I lost him. He looks at me now like he doesn't recognize me. Like I'm someone else. Maybe I am." I waited. She turned toward me then, her face raw, stripped of the polish. "I know I don't deserve anything. I need you to know that I wasn't always like this. I came from nothing. We were in shelters growing up. I swore I'd never go back. That I'd marry someone who could give me the life I never had. I held on to it too tight. I pushed too hard. There it was, the truth. Not a justification, not an excuse, but a root, a reason. We sat in silence for a while. Then she asked, "Can you forgive me?" I looked at her. At the tired, humbled version of the woman who once dismissed me with a smile. "No," I said gently. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I'm not angry anymore." She nodded, tears forming now. "I wish I could take it back," she whispered. "But you can't," I said. "And neither can I. All we can do now is live with it." She stood to leave. Before she turned away, she asked, "Do you hate me?" I looked out at the lake. "No," I said, "but I don't trust you, and that matters more." She walked away without another word, and I stayed on that bench long after she disappeared. Not because I was waiting for anything, but because I wanted to remember the feeling, the silence after a storm, the way peace settles into the bones, not loudly, but fully. I didn't cry when she walked away. Not then. I thought I might, but the tears never came. It wasn't relief. It wasn't triumph. It was just stillness. Like the part of me that had been clenching for months, maybe years, finally let go. Not because I forgave her, but because I stopped carrying the weight of her choices. That was the real freedom. Not the deed to the house. Not the letter from David. Not the trust account. Just the decision to lay it down and not pick it back up. The days that followed were quiet. The kind of quiet that used to make me uneasy. Back when I filled every space with busyness, noise tasks, something to prove I still mattered. But now, I let the silence in. I walked slowly through my day. I cooked with both hands again, real meals, not just things to fill the plate. I sat with neighbors I barely knew before sharing stories over coffee. I picked up books I'd meant to read for years. It was a small life, but it was mine. And it was enough. Then came the call from Grace House, Ms. Ellis. The woman's voice on the line was soft, but certain. "We've moved in 3 families, a mother of 2 boys, a grandmother raising her granddaughter, and a young woman only 19 with a baby girl. I thought you should know. The house is full of life again. Real life." I felt the corners of my mouth turn upward. Not a smile exactly. Something smaller, a soft lift, like the soul exhaling. I'm glad I said. "Would you like to visit?" she asked. "We've preserved a few pieces. We kept the garden. We even saved the wind chime by the kitchen window." I thought for a moment. Then I said yes. It was the following Saturday when I returned to the house, not as a victim, not as a mother, forced out, but as a woman reclaiming her space one final time. The front door was open when I arrived. Laughter spilled out light, spontaneous. It sounded like healing. Inside, things had changed. New curtains, crayon drawings taped to the walls, a playpen in the corner of the living room. But some things remained. The old clock still hung in the hallway, the dent in the kitchen table still there, the sound the floor made near the back door when you stepped on it too quickly. I ran my hand along the banister of the stairs and remembered the years Matthew slid down it in his pajamas, laughing like nothing bad would ever touch us. And then I saw her. The young woman with the baby. She stood in the nursery, my old sewing room once, and turned when I stepped in. She had wide, wary eyes, protective. "Hi," I said gently. She nodded. "Are you the owner?" "Not anymore." I smiled. "Just someone who loved this place once, and still does." She looked down at her daughter. "It's safe here. That's all I care about." I nodded. "That's all I ever wanted it to be." She smiled then. A real one, not grateful in that performative way. Just warm. "Thank you," she said. I stepped out onto the back porch after that. The garden had grown wild but beautiful. Lavender sprouting where tomatoes once stood. Sunlight stretched across the grass like a blessing. I sat on the old bench David built with his hands. The wood was worn, but it held me like it always had. And for the first time in a long time, I spoke to him. "They're gone now," I whispered. "Just like you said they would be." But it didn't go the way I thought. I thought I'd be angry forever. I thought I'd punish them in my mind every day until the end. But instead, I just feel quiet. A breeze lifted through the trees. The wind chime rang out soft and high. "You'd like what we did with the place," I said. "It's full of good people now. People who need it, not people who want to own it." A little boy ran past, chasing a paper airplane. He looked at me briefly, then waved. I waved back. I stayed for an hour, maybe 2. Then I left through the back gate, and I didn't look back, because I didn't have to anymore. Back in my apartment, I pulled out David's last letter one final time. Not because I needed reassurance, but because I wanted to hear his voice again, even just through the page. I read it slowly, then tucked it away into a new folder labeled Closure. And that night, I started writing my will. It wasn't long. It didn't need to be. My funds would go to the community center, the church pantry, a small portion to Matthew, enough to help, not enable. Nothing to Rachel, the rest Grace House. Always. I signed it, folded it, and placed it in the lockbox under my bed. Then I poured myself a cup of tea and watched the sunset out my window, the orange light spilling over the city like a promise. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't victory. It was restoration. Not of a home, but of myself. And when the wind blew through the trees outside, I heard David's voice again, just faintly. "You did good, love. You did real good. The seasons changed like they always do, but this time I felt it in my chest instead of my bones." Autumn came soft and golden, with the trees shedding what no longer served them. I understood that now. Letting go wasn't loss. It was survival. Some things we outgrow without bitterness. Some things we leave behind with thanks. That was the lesson I had earned painfully and fully, and I wasn't rushing anymore. Matthew didn't call after our last visit. Not right away. Weeks passed, then a month, and I was okay with that. There was nothing left to say, not yet. He needed time to sit in his consequences, to walk through the ruins of what he'd built with assumption and silence. I had made peace with that. He was still my son, yes. But I had also learned to love myself again, and I wasn't willing to unlearn that. Then one morning in late October, my phone rang just after sunrise. I almost didn't answer. But something in me said, "Listen." "Hi, Mom." His voice came through quieter this time. Measured. "I was wondering if I could come over. I've got something for you." I paused, not because I was unsure, but because I didn't want to fill the space with unnecessary words. "Okay," I said, "after lunch." He arrived at 1:07 p.m., right on time, holding a small box in his hands. No bags, no phone in sight, just the box. His coat was worn, his beard trimmed but uneven. He looked tired in the eyes, but lighter somehow. We sat at the little kitchen table. He didn't ask for tea. He didn't make small talk. "I've been in therapy," he said suddenly, "since you gave the house away." I raised an eyebrow. He laughed a little. That sentence still stings. But it was the right one. I waited. It made me look at everything. Not just what I did, but why. How Rachel and I treated you. How I let her do the talking for both of us. How I treated you like a placeholder instead of a person. That's what it felt like I said. He nodded. "I know." He slid the box toward me. I didn't open it right away. I looked at him instead. "It's not an apology gift," he said. "It's something I kept. Something of Dad's." My heart did a quiet, hesitant ache. I opened the box. Inside was a cassette tape, an old labeled one. The kind we used to use to record messages back in the 80s. On the label in David's handwriting, it said simply, "For her, if it all goes wrong." I pressed my hand over my chest. "I found it in the garage," Matthew said, "buried in his toolbox. I think he recorded it when he got sick. Maybe he meant to give it to you himself, but he forgot." I reached for it slowly, carefully, like touching a memory too fragile to wake. "I had it digitized," he said. "It's on a USB too." I didn't listen to it. "Thank you," I said. He stood. "No fanfare, no grand speeches, just a quiet 'I'll let you decide when we talk again.'" And then he left. I didn't play it right away. I waited until the sky turned orange, until the world was quiet, until the past didn't feel so sharp. Then I pulled out the old player I still kept in the closet, plugged it in, and slid the tape into the deck. The click of the play button was like opening a door. And then, his voice. "Hey, love, if you're hearing this, things probably didn't go the way we planned. I'm sorry I couldn't stay longer. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But if this found its way to you, then I guess I need to say some things I didn't get to say in time." I closed my eyes and let the sound of him wrap around me. "You were the best thing I ever did. You made a home out of nothing. You made Matthew into a man. You made me better than I had any right to be. If they've hurt you, if the people we raised forgot what you're made of, don't you let that dim your light." A pause, a breath. "You don't owe anyone your silence, not even him. You protect your peace, woman. You protect your name. And if you need to burn the house down, to do it metaphorically, of course, then light the match. I'll be with you." I laughed then, through the tears. "I love you, and I trust you. You'll know what to do." Click. Silence. I sat there long after the tape ended, hands trembling, heart wide open. He had known. Somehow David always knew. And he gave me permission. Not just to defend myself, but to live. To stop shrinking. To stop apologizing for being the backbone. Later that night, I called Matthew. He answered on the first ring. "Thank you," I said. "You listened to it, I did." A pause. "He believed in you more than anyone he said. I see that now." "Good," I replied. "Because I believe in me, too." We didn't speak long. We didn't need to. But something unspoken passed between us. Not repair, not reunion, but recognition. He saw me now, not just as mom, but as a woman who survived the fire and came out cleaner on the other side. The snow came early that year. Light at first, then heavy blanketing everything, like forgiveness falling from the sky. I stood at the window most mornings with a cup of tea in hand, watching the world turn white. It quieted the noise. The kind that used to live in my chest. That soft, persistent ache of wondering if I'd done the right thing. But now, I didn't question anymore. I just stood in it. Present. Solid. Whole. I'd found a rhythm in my little place. The creaky floors and thin walls didn't bother me. I liked hearing life happening around me, neighbors talking, a dog barking upstairs, the whir of someone's laundry machine spinning late at night. It reminded me I wasn't alone. Not anymore. The community center kept me busy. I started running a small workshop for older women widows, grandmothers, divorcees. Women who'd lived lives that were quiet and long, yet still bruised in hidden places. We talked about memory, about identity, about being seen again after being invisible for too long. Some days we laughed so hard we cried. Other days we just cried. But always we left lighter. One afternoon, I was cleaning up the folding chairs when I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was Helen, sharp-witted 71 with a mouth like a sailor and a heart like a cathedral. "You're different lately," she said, arms crossed. "Different," how I asked, wiping down a table. "Your spine's straighter. You walk like someone who knows she has nothing to prove." I smiled. "I guess I don't." "Good," she said. "Took you long enough." That night, I sat down and opened a fresh notebook. I hadn't journaled in years, not since before David got sick. But I felt the itch now, not just to remember, but to record, to name things. December 9th. I am not the woman who left her home with 2 suitcases. I am not the woman they mistook for fragile. I am not what they tried to turn me into. I am who I've always been. They just forgot. I just forgot. Not anymore. The next day, I mailed a letter. To Matthew. It wasn't long, just a few sentences. "You are always welcome in my life, but I am not returning to yours unless I am respected. No conditions, no apologies required, but no more erasure. If you want to rebuild it, starts with honesty, not expectations." He replied a week later. A letter too. Not a text. "I hear you, I see you, and I want to start over on your terms. Not mine. I don't expect anything from you, but I want you in my daughter's life, and I want her to know the kind of woman she comes from." I cried reading that. Not because it fixed anything, but because it didn't try to. It just told the truth. And that was enough. We agreed to meet the day after Christmas. No gifts, no big meal, just coffee at a quiet little diner halfway between us. He arrived early this time, waiting outside with his hands in his pockets, breath fogging in the cold. When I stepped out of the cab, he hugged me. No hesitation, no weight behind it. Just a son holding his mother again. Inside, we talked about his daughter, her new words, her stubborn streak, how she insists on wearing glittery shoes with her pajamas. "She reminds me of you," he said, smiling. "Even though she doesn't know you yet." I didn't correct him, because she would. He looked at me then. Really looked. "Do you miss the house?" "No," I said. "And I meant it." "Rachel called," he added after a pause. "Said she wants to come back?" I told her no. I raised an eyebrow. I told her she needed to change, and that I needed to be someone different too. Someone who doesn't get told how to think. He stirred his coffee. "I think I learned that from you." We didn't say much after that, just sat in the silence like people who'd finally stopped running from it. When we parted, he hugged me again. This time longer, warmer, and I walked back into my small apartment, not as someone returning to a temporary space, but as a woman who had chosen her peace. Later that night, I lit a candle and sat at the little table David used to sand down in the garage, the one I kept all these years even when everything else changed. I lit that candle not for mourning, but for presence, for the woman I had become in the silence. I looked around at my space, the shelves filled with books, the couch draped with a quilt I'd made during long nights after David passed, the plants growing wild and unbothered in the window, and I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. I wasn't surviving anymore. I was living, really living. It had been nearly a year since I'd left the house, a year since the betrayal, the silence, the unraveling of a life I thought I understood. Funny how time softens the edges, even of the deepest cuts. I didn't forget, no. I remembered everything, but the sting had dulled. And in its place was something unexpected. Wisdom. The days had taken on a kind of rhythm. I cooked. I read. I walked to the market twice a week. I laughed with Helen on Thursdays, volunteered on Tuesdays, wrote in my journal most nights. I spoke to Matthew every couple of weeks now. Not about the past, just the present. He sent photos of his daughter, her learning to ride a tricycle, her painting the walls with yogurt, her asleep in his arms. I saw him now, not as a son who failed me, but as a man learning who he was without being told. And then one morning, in early March, I got the message. It was from Rachel. Not a letter, not a voicemail, an email. Subject 1, last visit. Body. I understand if you say no, but if you're willing, I'd like to speak to you. Just once. No expectations. Just whatever truth there is left between us. Rachel. I stared at it for a long time, not because I didn't know the answer, but because I didn't expect her to ask. I replied later that night. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. The park by the old train bridge. It was the same place I'd met her before, that first cold confrontation. But this time, I didn't feel dread. I felt clear. She arrived 10 minutes early. I saw her standing there, arms folded, coat wrapped tight. Her hair was longer, darker. She looked older. Not in a bad way. Just more real. I walked up quietly. She turned before I reached her. "Thanks for coming," she said. I nodded. We didn't sit. We stood under the overcast sky near the frozen pond, the wind brushing past like it wanted to listen too. "I'm not going to pretend this is easy," she said, voice tight. "I've gone over this 100 times in my head, all the things I'd say, but none of it feels like enough." I stayed quiet. "I was wrong," she said. "Not just in what I did, but how I saw you. I thought you were someone I could move aside. I thought I was claiming what I deserved. But I see now, I didn't build anything. I just walked into it expecting it to be mine." She swallowed hard. Her eyes were glassy, but no tears fell. "I lost everything because of that. My marriage, my child's respect, and honestly, myself. But the thing I regret most is what I did to you." I took a step closer, just enough to make sure she heard every word that came next. "You didn't just push me out of a house. You tried to erase a life. My life. And worse, you did it thinking I'd be too old, too soft, too tired to fight back." She nodded, shame deep in every inch of her. "I underestimated you," she whispered. "No," I corrected, her voice steady. "You never saw me to begin with." She looked down. "I know I can't fix it. I don't want it fixed," I said. "That part of my life is done. What I want is for you to understand that silence isn't weakness, that being kind isn't the same as being blind. You made me choose between peace and proximity, and I chose peace." Rachel's lip trembled. She nodded slowly. "You made the right choice. I know." She exhaled. "I'm leaving the city. Taking a job in Ottawa? A fresh start. I won't bother Matthew. I won't reach out unless he wants me to." I said nothing. She took something from her pocket then. A small envelope. "It's not money. It's not a gift. Just a letter. One I wrote during therapy. For closure, you don't have to read it. I took it. I'll decide when." She nodded. "I hope one day your granddaughter knows who you are," she said quietly. "Not the version we tried to define. The real one." "She will," I said. Rachel gave a small nod. Then she turned and walked away. And I didn't watch her go, because that part of the story didn't belong to me anymore. I went home, lit a candle, sat at my little table. I didn't open her letter. Not that day, maybe not ever, but I kept it, not as forgiveness, but as proof. Proof that the woman they tried to silence stood her ground, that the one they tried to erase became a chapter they couldn't ignore. And in the quiet that followed, I realized something. I didn't need Rachel's apology. I didn't need Matthew's approval. I didn't need David's letter. Because I had become the kind of woman I used to admire. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. It was a Sunday afternoon when I returned to Grace House for the first time in months. The snow had finally melted, giving way to the scent of thawing soil and new beginnings. I stood across the street for a few minutes before walking up to the front steps, just watching. There were children playing in the yard, chalk drawings scattered across the pavement like little declarations of survival hearts, sons' names written in crooked letters. Women sat on the porch sipping tea from mismatched mugs, their laughter soft but alive. It looked like a place that breathed, like healing lived there now. The moment I stepped inside, it was like the walls remembered me. Not as the woman who used to sleep upstairs, but as the woman who had set it all in motion. The director met me at the door, arms open, smiling wide. "I didn't expect you today," she said. "I just wanted to see it again," I replied. "One last time." She walked me through each room. The dining table had been expanded now, seating 12 instead of 6. The kitchen smelled like lentils and rosemary. The living room was full of cushions and books, tiny handprints on the window glass. "We've had 16 women pass through so far," she told me. 3 have already moved into permanent housing. One of them started her own cleaning business. Another is going back to school. And the youngest, Kayla? She's finishing her GED. Her baby just started walking. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. "David would have loved this," I said. "He'd be proud of you," she said. I walked through the hallway and stopped in what used to be our bedroom. It had been turned into a shared room now. 2 twin beds, a nightlight in the corner, a quilt I recognized from our old linen closet folded neatly on one. It didn't hurt. It didn't sting. It just felt full. I left them with a small donation. I didn't tell them how much. Just signed the check and tucked it into an envelope marked "Quiet Gifts." That's how I wanted it. Quiet. No plaques. No dedications. Just change, lived and felt. Outside, I stood at the edge of the garden. The lavender had started to push through again. Spring always finds a way even through hard ground. I knelt and pressed my hand to the earth. Not for show. Not even for closure. Just to say goodbye properly. Not to the house. To the version of me that lived here. That woman had done her job. She had fought. She had held the line. She had risen. And now she could rest. Later that evening, I went home and began packing. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I'd found a small cottage for rent near the edge of town. 2 bedrooms, a garden, a fireplace. It wasn't large, but it was mine. Not tied to anyone. Not shadowed by memories I had to survive. Matthew offered to help me move. I let him. He arrived with boxes and tape, his daughter in tow. She ran through my apartment curious and wild. When she stopped in front of me, she looked up and said, "Are you Grandma?" I knelt and smiled. "Yes, I am." She threw her arms around my neck, just like that. No history, no baggage, just love without permission. Matthew watched, emotion brimming in his eyes. "I told her all about you," he said. "The real you." "I'm glad," I replied. We packed through the afternoon. Laughed, ordered too much takeout, shared memories that no longer hurt to tell. That night, after they left, I lit the fireplace in my new cottage and sat beside it with a book David once loved, his favorite collection of nature essays, worn and underlined in places. I turned to a page where he'd scribbled a note in the margin. "The things that survive the winter always come back stronger." I closed the book and stared into the fire, letting the warmth settle into my skin. It wasn't revenge that got me here. It wasn't anger. It was knowing when to stop fighting for the past and start building something new. I wrote one final journal entry that night. March 28th. I have closed every door I needed to, and in doing so, I've opened one more. The woman I became in silence is not bitter. She is not broken. She is not anyone's victim. She is the author of what comes next, and she has no intention of writing anyone else's lies. Outside, the wind picked up, but inside, everything was still. Still and finally mine. The last chapter didn't come with fanfare. There was no grand party, no applause, no gathering of everyone I'd ever known offering tearful apologies and promises to change. Real closure doesn't come like that. It arrives quietly in the small things. The way your body exhales without you realizing it. The way your home feels warm even when you're alone. The way the past stops chasing you at night. That morning, I woke up in my new cottage and didn't reach for my phone. I didn't check messages. I didn't replay old conversations. I just let the sunlight creep in across the quilt and took it as a blessing. A reminder that I had made it. Not just out of the house, but out of the silence they once forced me into. The kitchen smelled like fresh bread. My hands had started baking again. I hadn't realized how much I missed the rhythm of it flour-water patience. You can't rush a good loaf. You can't skip the rising. Some things just take time. The doorbell rang around 9. When I opened it, Matthew stood there holding a bouquet of lilacs and a nervous smile. "Am I too early?" "No," I said, stepping aside. "You're right on time." He set the flowers in a vase while I poured us tea. We didn't talk much at first. Just the clink of cups, the creak of the floorboards. Then he spoke. "I sold the car," he said. I looked up. "The new one?" He nodded. "Didn't need it. Downsized the apartment too. I've been spending more time with Grace, his daughter, my granddaughter. I'd like you to be in her life more," he said. "If you want." I didn't answer with words. I just opened the side cabinet and pulled out a wrapped box. "She likes puzzles," I said. His eyes softened. "I was angry for a long time," he admitted. "At you, at myself, at Rachel, but mostly at myself." "I know," I said. "I thought I was protecting my family," he continued. "But I was just protecting my comfort. Letting Rachel push meant I didn't have to make the hard choices." "You let her be the bad guy," I said. He nodded. "And I became one too." I sipped my tea. "So now what?" He looked up. "Now, I want to rebuild. Not the old way. Not by pretending nothing happened, but by showing you I see it. I see you." We sat in silence again. But this time it was full. Not empty. He stood to leave, but before he walked out, he paused at the door. "I never asked, do you regret giving the house away?" I shook my head. "Not for a second." He looked down. "Neither do I." After he left, I went outside to the garden. The snow was gone now, and little green shoots had started breaking through the soil. I knelt and pressed my fingers into the earth just to feel it. Just to know it was real. Inside my will sat on the desk. Finalized. Witnessed. Every detail exactly as it should be. The funds secured, the property arrangement sealed. A copy had been given to the lawyer, another to Matthew. I kept one in a fireproof box next to David's letter and the digitized copy of his tape. They were all pieces of the same truth. Not revenge, not legacy, just clarity. Grace House would receive the last of what we built. A scholarship fund would open in David's name. And my granddaughter, should she grow into the kind of woman I hope she does, would inherit one thing from me, my story. Not the edited version. Not the clean one. The real one. The one where I was betrayed and survived. Where I was silenced and found my voice. Where I was pushed out and chose to rise instead of crawl back. The one where the woman nobody expected to fight rebuilt everything on her own terms. I sat down that night by the fireplace, the orange glow flickering across the room. David's voice played once more through the speakers, just for me. "You'll know what to do." I smiled. "I did," I whispered back. And then I turned off the recording. Not because I didn't want to hear it, but because I didn't need it anymore. The woman I am now doesn't need reminders. She is the reminder of strength, of boundaries, of quiet, lasting power. And for the first time in a long, long time, there was nothing left to say, only to live.